Hi, I am Alex. My students call me Mrs. Parker, and I'm going to be taking you briefly through the planning process and outline of this unit plan, explaining 2 activities in more detail. This unit is working from the Australian Curriculum version 9 in a Year 5 class setting. This unit is for a theoretical school that is completely online, where students engage in learning content asynchronously, with synchronous learning lessons a few times a week. This unit plan will assist students in achieving the following achievement standards. English is on the left side and digital technologies is on the right side. This unit plan is aimed at these content descriptors. The English content descriptors are in green and the digital technologies content descriptors are in brown. After deciding to combine 2 learning areas and considering how these could interact with each other, I thought of my pedagogy of inclusion and the requirement for an inquiry-based approach and how to engage students in the classwork in an online aspect. The next consideration was how can the technology available be used to complete the activity. This aligns with TPAC, and the unit instructions was inspired by the full roles of the online teacher. The next consideration was to determine how to present the information online that would support engagement from students and remain inclusive and accessible, which led to the choice of Google Classroom and Google Meet, as they are free and easily available with appropriate security measures for young people's safety. This accessibility means that students will not be spending all their time learning to use the technology and will be able to engage in the class content. Students will use Google Classroom to engage with the learning content and assessment. This also allows students to interact with their teacher and peers through common threads on each assigned classwork. The teacher can engage students further through creating announcements where students can comment and talk with each other, just like on social media like thread sections. This not only promotes class engagement, but supports teaching the general capability of personal and social engagement. Then, during class time on Google Meet, teachers can engage students through asking critical thinking questions, asking them to keep their cameras on, and prompting them to comment on each other's work and participation, much like in a regular classroom. Staying in the managerial role during explicit teaching, then moving to the social role when students are completing classwork, will support keeping students socially engaged with each other. The combined unit will be taught over 8 weeks, but this video will look at the digital technology section of the unit, which is 5 weeks of learning containing 5 online classes. This flowchart shows how the English modules and digital technologies modules work alongside each other to meet for the combined Module 3, where the short story will be created as an interactive game. It is noted that the reason to start the English module 3 weeks earlier is because students need to read a book and begin writing their own story, which will require more time to complete. The first lesson will see students exploring the Scratch website asynchronously before class, then during class creating their own codes that set the foundation for what they can create over the next few weeks. Students will then explore creating codes further to support their understanding of what can be done while coding with Scratch and begin to see how it will look for their final assessment piece. Next, students will engage in interactive games and how to create them using Scratch, leading them to their final assessment piece, where they create an interactive game based on their short story with more than one ending in English. These 5 lessons all support students in completing their assessment and to understand their requirements to create codes with interactive components. The first lesson has asynchronous components, where students will explore the Scratch website before the class. This allows students to engage in the content as they need and allows for students with prior knowledge to either learn more or focus on a different learning area. Showing students what they are expected to know and having specific questions for them to answer before class helps them to see the class expectation, and this allows the teacher to not focus on the specifics of how to use Scratch and explicitly teach them how to create codes. Allowing the asynchronous learning promotes student autonomy and self-regulation to complete the task before class and engage in the work so they can answer the questions and actively participate in class. At the beginning of the unit, the teacher will explain to the class the assessment task, so the students understand the purpose of what they are learning and can focus on tutorials that interest them and that they believe will support them in the completion of their assessment. When they come together as a class to complete this synchronous activity, the teacher can explicitly teach the students how to manipulate images and items using their code. The class will demonstrate students coding at a more complicated level of coding than what was explored in the online tutorials, so students can gain a deeper understanding of the multiple options with coding, aligning with the content descriptor of implementing algorithms as visual programs involving control structures, variables, and input. Students will complete the coding activities and then complete the required homework activities before the next lesson to prepare them for their next in-class learning activities. These homework activities are listed in Google Classroom under the modules, where students will post their completed homework for the teacher to collect as evidence of formative assessment. The next learning activity discussed is completed asynchronously and synchronously, as it is their summative assessment piece completed in Module 3, which provides opportunities to complete their assessment in class while getting feedback from their peers as well as their teacher. This aligns with building student capability to learn. The benefits of using Scratch online instead of the application on a desktop computer is the ease of sharing their codes with peers for feedback, which continues to promote the social engagement of students in a productive manner, building their relationships with each other and their ICT capabilities. This summative assessment will be completed over 3 weeks, where students will engage in the interactive games and then engage in completing their own. Students are encouraged to begin completing their assessment task in the 4th week, when they are exploring interactive codes, as they will have the deadline of completing their English story by this time. The assessment will then be available for students to play with once created for their classmates to engage with at the end of the assessment period. This unit takes a student-centered approach, where students have more freedom to choose where, when, and how they complete their assessment piece. The interactivity allows for collaborative inquiry, where they can interact with their peers, answering questions about how they got the inspiration for their stories, and games from the story that they read at the start. This structured unit plan allows for more student autonomy, where students need to maintain self-regulation to stay on task, allowing for the general capability of personal and social capability, as well as critical and creative thinking to engage effectively with the unit. While there is no diagnostic assessment, there are many opportunities for formative assessment, where students will submit their completed homework on Google Classroom to show their progress and for the teacher to identify what the students need support with to achieve their learning goals and complete the assessment satisfactorily. The summative assessment provides choice for students in their story recreation and how they can engage in the learning process with their peers. This promotes social connections between students as well as their teacher in a way previously not experienced, as they ask for the feedback from their peers on their interactive games.